Welcome, welcome. My name is Femi Akonde, and you're watching the hottest debate show on TV, The Big Issue. Good. Well, now hear this. With over 180 million human capital, a landmass of over 90,000 square kilometers, and of course, the status of the biggest economy in Africa, Nigeria also ranks as the poverty capital of the world. A recent report by the World Poverty Clock listed Nigeria as a country with the highest number of extremely poor people, ahead of India and even the Democratic Republic of Congo. Civil rights groups have clamored for the right to food bill as a solution to Nigeria's poverty status. Do you agree? Well, we'll go on a quick break at this point, and when we return, we'll debate the right to food bill. You're still watching The Big Issue. Is the right to food bill what we need to curb the growing poverty rate in Nigeria? Well, to discuss this topic or to debate this topic, first, let's welcome Shola Kolawole. Let's welcome Shola Kolawole. Welcome. Thank you. Well, Shola Kolawole here is a social rights advocate. He's also the co-founder of the Rural Environmental Empowerment Initiative. Good to have you here, Shola.
Thank you, Femi.
A round of applause again. And on the flip side, we have Adeniyi Kunu. Let's welcome Adeniyi Kunu. Welcome, sir. That side. Adeniyi Kunu is a well-known commentator on Inspiration FM, the breakfast show. Pay-per-view, am I correct?
Most definitely.
Yeah, pay-per-view.
Yeah.
He's a researcher and a political analyst. Let's welcome Adeniyi Kunu. Well, you had the statistics. Nigeria is now the capital of poverty in the world.
The global capital.
Yeah, the global capital of poverty in the world.
Yeah.
How can we change these statistics?
Well,
or how did we even get here?
Just like you said, you talked about the right to food bill. You see, the problem we have, not only in Nigeria, but Africa, is that we have refused to do the needful. Our area of advantage, which has always been agriculture, has been abandoned, and in spite of several summits, gatherings of head of states, you know, a lot of reports here and there, we still don't get it right. And this is why we are where we are now. It's a shame that we are talking about Nigeria being the global capital of poverty in a situation where we ordinarily should be feeding the world. We are now being pointed to as the headquarters of poverty. Don't forget that there's a connection, there's a nexus between food and poverty. And food in this context, we are talking about agriculture. What has been our commitment over the years to that particular sector that ordinarily engages a large chunk of our population. Those in the cities rely on the rural sector where food is being produced massively. But what have we given to that sector, that region of our country that produces and feeds the nation?
Okay, let me allow Kunu weigh in on this now.
Yeah.
Do you agree with these statistics? Are they correct? Because
Well,
I know the government disagrees.
Well, let me first of all correct the population figure I saw there. At the moment, the population, according to world population data, is over 198 million. And I do not
had a census, a head count in Nigeria.
Well, the point is we should have had it in 2016 because the last one we had was in 2006.
True.
And it's the failure of governments, because if something is so structured, so that it could be used to address certain things that would help us develop. And government, in its utter responsibility, has refused to do what should have been done. I think it's a problem. You see, some of the countries we love to run over to are what they are today because they take cognizance of the importance of statistics. So for the benefits of information, the current data we have as our population is 198 million and about 578,000. That's for the records. And they have also been given certain percentages in terms of the increase in population. That is why they're projecting that by 2050, we would definitely be over 400 million, taking over from the current population of the US, so moving up. Yeah. So I want to say here categorically that I think as much as food is very important, we should do certain things preceding our advocacy for food. The reason I've said that is this. The consciousness of those born within 60s, 70s, and maybe before the 80s or early 80s is an entirely different mindset from those born, mid of 85, 92,000. And that's why oftentimes they talk about the millennials as people you have to really take cognizance of because they are the ones going to take advantage of the next big stage. So I say here that as important as food is, there's a need for you to tidy up data. Because if you do not see the importance of working with data, even the advocacy for the stomach, which unarguably may be the biggest constituency of every human being, may not be functional. So my recommendation should be, because even if you look at the Food Rights Bill, it's been there since 2008. That was the first time it was proposed. And at least it happened, soon after Obasanjo left office and Yar'Adua came in. It has not gone through it because I think there are other things bedeviling the government from then till now. As much as it is important, I do not think it's a priority at the moment. I just want to put that forth.
Wow.
Yes, of course.
Round of applause for Kunu. Maybe, as he says, the Food Rights Bill is not our priority at the moment. And the government has its own priorities. They are looking at maybe building an infrastructure like roads and bridges and doing other things like, of course, even the poverty, the empowerment programs that they do as a means of alleviating poverty. Maybe these are priorities that would precede the Food Rights Bill.
Abraham Maslow's theory of need. At the base, you have food. You see, food, when we talk about food, the Right to Food Bill, you see, the first thing that comes to mind is the meals that we take. But it's a whole potpourri of a lot of ancillary activities that revolves around agriculture. Agriculture and rural development, until we take it as a priority in Nigeria. I repeat that at the core of poverty is this food poverty. Now, if you look at what has happened in India to have overtaken Nigeria according to the global poverty clock, what India has done is that it has begun to set its priority right in the area of agriculture. And there are projections that in the next few years, India will be even far from the poverty rating that it currently has. Nigeria today does not have any food reserve. Let's talk about any emergency. We don't have food reserve that can last us for 30 days. India has food reserves that can last Nigeria for the next 10 years. I am telling you that even the farming population in this country is being depleted daily. If you look across, the news is all over the news. See communities that are being ravaged daily, and farmers can no longer go to the farm. And government is not looking at that sector as critical to the survival and the existence of Lagos. Lagos is still, the buzz around Lagos is still the fact that a lot of things come down here. Very soon you'll begin to see. About 2 years ago, we had tomato scarcity. And people really knew that tomato was important. That is just one out of several things that we produce as a nation and we depend upon. Now again, don't forget that it has gotten to a level in Nigeria now that soya beans is being imported from South America. We are even importing corn. Poultry Association of Nigeria, they are gathering money together to import corn to produce feed in this country. and we are saying food is not important. We are joking. This is the sector that employs the largest number of our people. And if government does not see this sector as critical, you can't talk about any other sector. Even before we start talking, averagely when you get to the hospital, when you talk about health, the first thing they tell you...
Let me just hold your thought there.
Okay.
Let me ask Kunu this. Like now he's trying to establish the nexus between poverty and food. But you know, over the years we've had different interventions by different successive governments in trying to eradicate or alleviate poverty. We had the NAPEP, that's the Poverty Alleviation Program by General President Olusegun Obasanjo then. Jonathan came on board, President Goodluck Jonathan came on board with the Sure Pay. Right now we have what is called the N-Power. If you go to Osun State, we have OES. In Kano State, we have the Ganduje Mass Economic Empowerment Scheme, where you see people are given keke napeps, wheelbarrows, grinding machines.
Noodles.
Yes, and noodles, meshais, or tea sellers, empowered shoemakers. Now, are these interventions, would you say these interventions have not achieved the purpose for which they are intended?
I think it's a lack of understanding by the respective leaders of the states you've mentioned. I know that Ganduje over some months ago was the one that actually shared noodles and all that, perhaps because of the needs of the people in Kano State. But I still want to maintain very strongly here that we may have to address very critical issues before we talk about food rights. If we took a sample of the opinions of those who are participants in this debate, that how many of them will be willing to go into agriculture? Because my colleague, my friend Kola, talked about, the food rights bill covering a gamut of certain areas, which I would agree. But the point is you have to, first of all, help develop people's enthusiasm so that you could have them believe that this project that they want to get into is the next big thing that they should get into that will affect their lives positively. What I'm saying in essence is, for the food rights bill to have what I'll call a symbiosis of response, first from the proponents of the bill as well as the people who will definitely form the crops of the future agriculturists, then you must take cognizance of their interest. How much of enthusiasm do they have in getting into agriculture, which, of course, the food rights bill is making a case for, because it's very critical. So I'm saying the first thing, the people in the rural areas must first of all understand that the government that represents everybody have something positive for them, such that they are able to say, okay, this government at the center has provided enough. It's talking about food rights bill. A lot of rural-urban migration is taking place. I did a proposal, I sent it to the University of Leicester in England. I examined what is happening in rural England. Part of the racism we have, particularly the influx into rural England at the moment, is as a result of the fact that they believe that certain jobs have been taken away from the rural areas, and more or less like the rural areas belong to the people, at least something they can hold on to. So the first thing we may need to address is the provision at near equal level of infrastructure good enough for people in the rural areas to be able to go with the tandems of time. For instance, we are talking about the next big stage. It is going to be data, it's going to be information technology. So what is the government doing for the greater population of people that are in rural areas who perhaps do not have the rudiments of education to understand that the world is global now? You can make connections and begin to affect your world. Let me tell you, food is important. But any man who doesn't understand that even to put food on your plate, you need to make efforts. Any man who doesn't understand that before you even eat the food, you need to have an idea of what food is good for me, wouldn't go anywhere. So I say here, and categorically stating, that it is important for government and anybody who indeed wants Nigeria to solve our problems to understand sensitization of people. Enthusiasm is critical. Education about the need for them to do certain things before they talk about food. Because after all, your president said you are lazy folks. So if the president could say you guys are lazy, it perhaps means that the government needs to do something to first of all make people understand that, okay, I'm not lazy, I have this idea, I want to implement this, I have this idea, I want to take this thing to the next level. Okay. So my friends, these things are very, very important.
He's talking about putting the right infrastructure in place, creating that environment, that enthusiasm. There needs to be that enthusiasm on the part of even the rural dwellers. And even talking about creating the providing that infrastructure could also be security. Look at the challenges we even have today, where farmers are no longer safe on their farmlands. That is a challenge, and of course, I feel a threat to food security.
You see, the Right to Food Bill also has as part of its components the production, the process of production, the process of supply of agricultural produce from the rural region to the urban centers. You see, when we talk about infrastructure, it is somebody who has eaten that will be able to appreciate the kind of infrastructure you are putting in place. Let me put it this way. You know, we say on the streets, a hungry man is an angry. You cannot talk to somebody who is hungry or somebody who doesn't have a means of accessing food.
That means of accessing food will be the purchasing power.
It must,
maybe that is what Kunu is talking about. That must be fixed first before we talk about that right to food.
The fundamental thing is that at the core of poverty is food poverty. Don't forget that. Why we are where we are is that we are not putting the right investments in place in the agric sector, where we have naturally the competitive advantage globally. Until we look at that itself. Because you're talking about agric, it's a whole value chain. It's not, you see, we should not forget that agriculture is gradually transversing the hoe and the cutlass approach that we focus on. It is beyond that. But that is aside. That's another argument.
Several interventions in this agri sector. I also remember this present government.
The interventions have not been sustainable. Let me tell you why.
During its campaign.
In Chapter 4 of our Constitution, we don't have food as a right. So when governments make interventions in agriculture, they make it as an act of charity.
So what does it mean to have food? To have food as a right. Now, are we now going to say that I don't know? Maybe the government provides the food. Or what do you mean by that right?
When we now have food as a right in Chapter 4 of our Constitution, it is now the obligation of government to respect, to fulfill, and to make sure that it protects the right of every citizen to have access to food in quantity and quality.
We'll take a quick break at this point, and when we return, it will be time for the next segment of the show. You're still watching The Big Issue. Well, this is the Fire for Fire segment, and in this segment, ladies and gentlemen, and of course, my debaters, you're free to ask yourselves questions and puncture each other's argument, but there should be decorum in all we do. And then, who would first bail the cat? Mr. Kunu, well, question to him.
Yes,
the right to food bill.
Yes, I just want to ask him, the last time I checked the Constitution, there's the right to life. Yeah. I will know repeatedly the criminalities of even SARS as an arm of the executive, arm of government in this country. I know that even when they talk about the right to education at the same time, you know that a lot of schools owned by government has not been fixed. Yeah. Whenever people talk about rights to certain things, the government is characteristic for not fulfilling, the promises they should fulfill. I also know that the Constitution is supreme, but Sambo Dasuki was left in custody even when 3 courts have granted him bail, up until maybe 2 or 3 days ago when they let him off the hook. So how indeed would you say this advocacy for food rights will guarantee its effective implementation so that people could even say, yes, indeed, this right is ineffective, or it's a right indeed?
You see the rights in chapter 2 are not justiciable, but the rights in chapter 4 are justiciable. If we have rights to food in our constitution, we have food as a right. I can go to court when government does not fulfill its obligation in that direction.
Sambo Dasuki's laws were repeatedly at the courts.
That you have a rogue administration does not mean that a right should not be enshrined in the constitution. It doesn't in any way. That you have an administration that does not appreciate education does not mean education should not be a right.
I feel strongly that that would even make the government more confused, because
Now,
a government that has not been able to do what it should do.
Some other basic rights.
The point is, my friend here earlier, before we took the break, talked about, he mentioned, agriculture as something very important, so that we can increase food production and the whole value chain.
Yeah.
But I said, what is the essence of, getting involved fully in agriculture when it would have taken me 2 days to move my produce from the farm to the market where it will be available, but because the roads are in terrible state, there are no silos for me to preserve my grain. I don't have some kind of, mechanized system in place to preserve those things. Then I have to go on that same road for about 2 weeks to get to where I would have gotten to maybe in 2 days and made a mess of my produce. Yeah. I'd like us to look at education, because, for instance, there is no way you can move anybody to see the need for something unless the person has passion and indeed sees the need for it. It's going to take a whole lot of effort to be able to move young people who are the very part of this population to get involved in that agriculture, because the bill could just be there as a sanctioned paperwork and not effective. And I'm saying here that if education, which at the primary level and in some states at the secondary level, it's a right of the people, still do not or still doesn't get the right kind of attention over the years, except of course maybe during one of Jonathan's tenure, education has not had anything up to 10% in a budgetary allocation for the year. And if that is a very important part of what people have said, it is a right, why do you want to endanger the life of another bill by proposing it and making it die a quick death, because it is not going to be given what it should be given, which is the deserved attention, the deserved funding, the deserved motivation? Because one thing we perhaps do not know is all of these bills, this is a citizens bill, no doubt about it. We have lots of other bills coming in and out that many people do not know of day in, day right.
Again, we all know Nigeria has a youthful population. More than 60% of the country's population are youth.
Yeah.
But these youths, I don't know if you agree, are not particularly interested in that sector, agriculture, where this bill is expected to be a catalyst for economic growth and empowerment. So how do you tweak that? How do you get them more enthusiastic about, or how do you help them to defend that right to food bill?
Let me first of all tell him that food is universal.
Sure.
There will be nobody here if there's no food.
Sure.
We'll not even be talking if there's no food. Now let me come directly at what we have just talked about. You see, the reason why there's no attraction to that sector is because government is not committed to that sector. Government is not under obligation. And the reason why government is not under obligation, to that sector is because food is not a right.
Let me say this. There's a place called Shenzhen in China. That Shenzhen in China has the biggest food gene lab in the world. It is not because of our rural ideologies. It is because of education. Over 300,000 gene seeds could be found there. What did they do? Because of education. In China, they don't have enough hectares of land for rice production. And they are projected that in the next 20, 30 years, they have more mouths to feed. Yeah. Because early 2017, China improved legislation that they can have an additional child. It was one-child policy before in China. Now you can have 2 children. They've been able to envisage that because we have larger population. What did they do? Areas where the water salinity is high, Education helped them. What did they do? They removed the salinity of the water, increased production. Education is needful. Knowledge is needful. If, for instance, they don't have knowledge, the rural agriculture that your bill perhaps projects will make us not be able to even measure up. Because if our population turn over 400 million by the year 2050, that simply means it's going to be disastrous. Empower people with education.
I would like you to respond. I'd like you to respond to this. You know, some people have said that truly the agricultural sector experienced some growth recently, maybe in the last 2-3 years, especially when the country slid into recession. And this was as a result of the failure of government to provide some other, or to protect some of their other basic rights, labor rights, where people lost, people were out of jobs, and some other kind. People went to agriculture, took solace in agriculture, and there was a spark in that sector, without necessarily having that right to food bill. Don't you think, like, the more people begin to see the failures of government, the more they begin to look for a way for themselves to put food in their stomach, put food on their table by going into agriculture?
That spark is not sustainable. It is not sustainable. Let me tell you another spark. The school feeding program, which was introduced by this administration. If you don't legislate food as a right, another government will come and scrap it and take up another thing entirely. What we are saying when we are promoting the right to food bill is that food must leave the regime of need to the regime of rights. It must become a priority of government. Even in the cities, how many people eat 3 square meals? Access, they don't. 300 naira, a Congo of Gari. Look at minimum wage, 18,000 naira divided by 30 days. And you have a family of 2, 3, 4. Do you think people can? People are really eating. We are joking. The other side of it, you see, the other side of it is that, yes, education, but who do you want to educate? Is it not somebody?
Perhaps I need to make it very clear.
Is it not somebody?
Perhaps I need to clarify.
Is it not somebody that is thinking? Is it not somebody that is in the right frame of mind, spirit, soul, and body that you will feed?
Perhaps
you see, the problem we have is that there's this general perception that the right to food bill will now warrant that government will now carry big pots in the middle of towns and begin to cook food and share to people. No! We are talking about the agriculture value chain, the whole complex called agriculture and rural development. It also incorporates infrastructure, storage, production, transportation, storage, processing, and even export, you know.
How about the right to life bill? Like, let's say if we have a whole right to life bill broken down into pieces, the right to food bill can also be infused somewhere.
That is exactly what I'm talking about. If the government that has the responsibility to protect lives and property know that part of what you should have to enjoy life is food, to be able to provide for yourself, because when you're talking about life in itself, it is not a singular thing. There's a whole lot incorporated into life. Being able to take care of yourself, perhaps take care of your dependents.
Don't forget that defense has a budget.
Well, I'm saying that life, those ones are even by the way, and often when we talk about defense and security, oftentimes those are provided for to ensure the integrity and the sovereignty of the state, internally and externally. But when you talk about life, it's a whole lot of things. Your life should have a premium. And what is a premium here is the fact that in this country, for instance, according to one of the World Data Statistics, at the moment, Nigeria is about 65 in position in terms of the average take-home a month, which is about $204. You have countries like Egypt, like Morocco, far ahead of Nigeria. South Africa stands at maybe 54. So I'm saying here that one of the things that we must find out as very critical is first of all, okay, what is the place of knowledge in all of this? Because it is the lack of knowledge that would even make your government believe that you have to have a legislation that food is a right for them to make sure that there's provision. So if the government has enough knowledge, you do not have to legislate that food is a right before government makes it something important. So what I'm saying here is you do not need, the reason why we over-legislate, counter-legislate, complexity legislation is because government doesn't understand the rudiments. That is why we keep legislating.
Shola, you know, sometimes Nigeria would like to compare ourselves with some other developed countries out there.
Yeah.
I don't know, what's obtainable out there? Is food all right, or how do they, what's the access to food like?
South Africa, sufficient in food production, because when we agreed on 10% in Maputo, that our national budget, 10% of our national budget will go to agriculture. We agreed, but we didn't execute. In the first instance, it was meant to be for like 5 years. Then we come back and review. Malabo, 2014. We did a review. Our scorecard was 0. But look at countries around us. Look at Burkina Faso, for instance. They are doing well because they are putting the right policies in place for their citizenry. The fact remains that if we don't make food a right, it will not be justiciable, and we cannot hold governments in any way responsible.
All right, yeah. Thank you very much. Well, a round of applause for our debater. Well, I would say the right to food bill has provoked a very interesting debate in here, and it's also the right of our audience to ask these debaters questions. But that will be after the break. You're still watching The Big Issue. It's now time for members of the audience to ask questions, and the first question is from Rokpo Egbeleke.
My question goes to both of them, but the focus is on you.
All right, please.
Because you emphasize and even overemphasize the necessity to look at the failures of the past bills. So you are using that one as a prerequisite to downplay the necessity now to have a right to food bill in place. But I want to ask you a simple question. Let us agree, I agree with you that all the past right to life in the chapter 4, right to education, right to liberty, right to freedom. Because we don't have 100%. Will you say they should remove it in the constitution so that we don't have it? What do you think? Should we not have the right to food bill as a right to guarantee the access to food?
I'd like you to respond to that.
Well, I want to refer to two very fundamental things about the kind of democracy we practiced since we attained independence in 1960. Having been colonized and attained independence from Britain, I want to say for the records that the British society is effective, efficient, functional, admired, and still has under it well over 80 Commonwealth countries, but it doesn't have a written constitution. That is for the records. And if you move away from the United Kingdom, you want to talk about the US, following which our model of democracy is put. It doesn't even have this so much, if perhaps you've seen the United States Constitution, it is not as bulky as ours, although it has certain amendments. But the US is a country every one of us will be willing to die for if we're given the blue passports. What I'm saying in essence here is to understand the need to contract where necessary. I wouldn't want to underplay the importance of food, but I want to say fundamentally here that we should leave ourselves from the troubles of repeatedly putting paperwork on government, and we must learn to work together. For instance, in the northeastern part of the country, I listened to Major General Rogers Nicholas say that there are too many civil society organizations working in the northeast and they don't have proper documentation. And that simply means these civil society organizations or NGOs have not been able to even identify any rallying point for one another and be able to say, you are taking care of children, we are taking care of women. Can we come together as non-governmental organization for women and children rather than have non-governmental organization for women, the other one for children, the other one for pregnant women? I'm saying here that we should learn to work smart. The 21st century is a jet age. And when we have repeated bills, repeated legislations, repeated provisions, there are times you don't know which to put together. It's more or less like you are writing the minutes of a meeting, and you start writing as if it's a book of fiction. Bullet points. It is in discussions that you expatiate that. And that is what I'm recommending, that at this point in time, it is not to jettison the importance of legislating for the food rights of people, but it is important to know where we need to harmonize our necessities and address it on the common front.
You are talking about life and property. Now, I want to ask you something. Let's assume we go into state of emergency.
Okay.
When he started his conversation, he said he compared our food reserve with the one of
South
India.
Africa.
India.
Okay,
India.
India, all right.
So it was obvious that we've not even met up to half of what the food reserve that India has. So let us assume we are in state of emergency, and then the food that we have cannot even sustain us for almost 2 years, 3 years.
A month.
A month. So, and we don't have that food reserve, and we are in state of emergency. I'm telling you right to your face, sir, that after 1 month, when everything in the reserve is finished, you'll be among those people that will fight for the right for food.
Okay. The Maputo and all of the declarations he talked about happened way before 2008 when this bill was first proposed. Please, that's for the record.
2010.
2020, but of course, something has been in the front burner since 2008, and that's the record that I have. Okay. Now, I want to say here that if previous administration understood that it is their responsibility to make provision, I'm saying here that if an American citizen, for instance, is convicted of any crime here, the American government doesn't allow it to serve its time here. For instance, the American government, was part of the country that established the courts, the International Criminal Court in The Hague, that's in the Netherlands. But do you know that no American leader has been brought to The Hague, even if we know that the George Bush administration lied to get into Iran, and they should have actually, gone to The Hague to answer for the crimes against Iran and all of the subsequent problems we've had. What I'm saying is this. We do not often need to emphasize legislation. For instance, the wages earned in Afghanistan, a troubled country, is more than what we earn a day here. For instance, the average Nigerian lives on less than $1 a day.
And we're also a troubled country, don't you think so?
We are a troubled country, but I think the bombardments that Afghanistan and Syria and surrounding countries have seen in the past 5-6 years, Nigeria has not experienced it. The destruction, the despoilation. Yet these countries that do not have as much resources and human resources as well as other capital resources as we are thriving more because the premium of the lives of people is important. Why? They didn't need legislation for most of these things. It is because they understand that the lives of their citizens matter, and it is the responsibility of government, not necessarily because there's a legislation. So I'm saying here that it is important for people, my dear, when I talk about education, I'm not talking, please take it away from the four walls of a learning environment. Knowledge about value for human life. Knowledge about the fact that if we don't take care of this, for instance, if we go to Israel, over 50% of the foreign exchange come from this same agriculture. And oftentimes they don't even need legislation to do this. It is a recognition of the fact that Israel is a desert country and they need to go to proper irrigation and mechanized farming. Not so much about legislation, but they see it as something that will make them take care of the future. So not legislation for everything, but responsibility and taking cognizance of what is needful.
All right, then. Your question, I believe, is directed at Mr. Shola Kolawole.
Yes, thank you. I have a question for Mr. Shola. Yeah. Earlier in your introduction, you said India has about
food reserves.
Yes, that can feed Nigeria for
10 years.
10 years. My first question is that if India has such food reserve, and you believe food alleviates poverty, why is India still among those countries that are poverty rated? Even though it's not, but it's among. One, that is question number one. Number two, I want to support this your co-debater in the sense that while, for instance, in Nigeria, the primary education or secondary education sector is collapsed. Now, people see the need for education to thrive. They go into private primary schools, secondary schools, even tertiary. If we see that there is need in agriculture, do we need any legislation? We can go into private agricultural businesses to thrive and improve food production in Nigeria, and we can even export. Thank you.
Well, I think you are mixing up two things here. And fundamentally, when we talked about the Right to Food Bill, we are talking about agriculture. And don't forget again that there's a component of education in agriculture. Any sectoral allocation to agriculture also services the colleges of education, colleges of agriculture, and the universities of agriculture. That same allocation covers what we have as our extension services. That same allocation also covers research and development in agriculture. Government, in laying our priorities, will first of all focus on the rights. Issues of rights will get priority when doing budgetary allocations. And when we have substantial portions of our budget allocated to agriculture, you begin to trigger development in that sector as it connects to every institution that connects to that sector. That is one. We continue to converse and talk about diversification of our economy. Anytime we talk about it, the first thing we mention is agriculture. So if you are, why were you not talking about education as a way of diversifying the economy? But you talk about agriculture, and it is that same agriculture now that doesn't get any prime of place when you are allocating resources. What the bill is pushing is that agriculture should be in the front of any budgetary allocation in this country after securing lives. And that has to do with the fact that 10% of our annual budget, let's try it. Let's try 10% of our annual budget in agriculture and see the ripple effect in the economy. That is what we are clamoring for. Until we see food as a right, government will continue to pay lip service to diversifying the economy through agriculture. The reason why they don't bring up education when the argument about diversification of the economy comes up is because they don't know how to use education to diversify. But at least we know agriculture can, because we have a ready-made population of farmers. What they need is just the basic inputs, infrastructures, technology, and education to maximize production.
All right. Your question.
Yeah, mine is to you, sir.
All right.
My name is John Akrede. You actually said education is good, and I quite agree with you perfectly on that fact. But your boss says that which means that the right to food should be established. You have said it times and number that, and you know for a fact that in Nigeria and even globally, Nigeria have the highest number of educated immigrants in the world. That's a fact. Yeah. But how has that helped us as a nation? It hasn't given us anything that I think if we should go on agriculture as a line which is towing. Look at, you are of age and you remember the good days where you should talk about states that are doing export of banana, cocoa, granite, rubber, and the likes. And Nigeria was good then. People were enjoying themselves. As a matter of fact, the son of a farmer,
the economy of the Southwest.
You can walk tall as a son of a farmer. But now the other way is the case. And we are saying go to school. We have chunk out graduates, and we have come back to say the graduates are unemployable. And you have saying they should go to school again. Which school are you talking about?
Thank you very much. Education, in the light of my discussion or my proposition, is not just within the four walls of a university. And I want to say here that the reason we have found ourselves here in the first place is because we don't have a knowledge of our future responsibilities. You can imagine if governments join my days that you referred to, I've been able to have a foreknowledge of the fact that our population is increasing, oil may not be there forever, and that this agriculture is important. Government were long ago provided mechanism, put in place systems to make people see that the next cash cow may be for Africa, because let's not deceive ourselves. The next big thing is even data, is information technology. If you check the 5 richest persons in the world now, none of them is an industrialist as you used to have. You want to talk about Jeff Bezos, talking about Bill Gates, you want to talk about Warren Buffett. These people are into stocks, they are into tech, and the rest of it. It tells you that the next big thing, agriculture is good for sustenance. But let us also not take it away that knowledge is why you have the likes of Bill Gates remain at 1 and 2 for the past 15, 20 years. Please, let us not take it away. There's hunger in America. There's hunger in UK. But the point is the knowledge of the time tells us that we have to seek it. Proposing paperwork for agriculture may not be the momentary encumbrance that we need to befuddle ourselves with. But let us understand that we indeed need to propose ideas. Ideas are synonyms for knowledge, not so much about formal education, that what should be done should be done. For instance, I don't need to be told that if I must wear properly ironed clothes tomorrow, if there's electricity today, or if there's a dry cleaner somewhere, I don't need education. I just need simple knowledge of preparing so I can look good enough to go to work. So I'm saying here, people, so please, it is simple logic. My friend here talked about the fact that they've been having nomenclatures for different poverty alleviation programs that have not been effective. I agree with him in total. The people that are giving new names and doing naming ceremonies for social intervention programs every time perhaps lack the knowledge, the basic knowledge, that if you see an idea, for instance, I'm going to use Lagos, where we all live as example. We have the PSP working, where you don't have giants of debt heaped at corners and junctions everywhere. Then the government of Ambode came with noble intention, that there is a visionscape. But the point is, while you are waiting for visionscape to come aboard, you need not have jettisoned PSP until visionscape comes to life. I know that, knowledge, yeah. Ambode wasn't hungry or full. You understand? Visionscape, good initiative to recycle, to generate power, fantastic. But why do you have to completely jettison an existing and functional operation while we have to wait a year? So knowledge, again, I say, is very important.
All right, then. Round of applause for our debaters. Well, at this point, it will be time for us to take the program home. And after the break, our debaters will have their last take on this subject, the right to food bill. You're still watching The Big Issue. Welcome back. Well, you agree with me that Shola Kolawole and Adeniyi Kunu have done justice, of course, on their own standpoint of this argument about the right to food bill. Now it's now time for them to have their last take on this subject matter. Shola Kolawole, in 60 seconds.
Well, my own last take on this would be, I want everyone to have it in mind, like I've said, that at the core of poverty is food poverty. And if we talk about diversifying our economy, and we see that it is only agriculture that can bail us out, we have to align with what we have committed to in terms of budgetary allocation to agriculture. It cannot be less than 10% of our annual budget, and it will drive our economy. It cannot be less than 10%. If we can have 10%, it is good for us. Okay. And that would have a ripple effect on our economy. It will reduce our demand for foreign exchange. It will drive agriculture, the pull and the push forces of production will be in place. Then we'll see development, rural development, also coming on board. Then it will check the current trend of rural-urban migration. You have a lot of people in the cities doing nothing who can be very, very productive when they go back to work in those rural environments.
All right, then. Thank you. Adeniyi Kunu, your last take on this, sir.
Well, I just want to recommend to my friend, before they finalize work on the bill, that they could review the child rights law, incorporate the right to food bill as part of it, such that the right to education law would reflect proper functionality of the entire agricultural chain, such that from the primary school level to the secondary school level, you make agriculture a compulsory course or subject that must be taken on the part, and make them understand that every school that must be approved by government, primary, because of course I know that even as a primary school pupil in this country, I joined Nature's Club, we had a farm, we had all these guinea pigs, and we had ideals so early that agriculture was important. So I'm saying here that they could review the child education law, incorporate this food rights bill, and let it work together such that you have a balance of education, reflect the importance of agriculture, of course, vote more money for it, and I tell you, we can save ourselves the complexities and the duplication of paperwork in the name of making it laws.
Wow. That's been the debate. Gentlemen, before we leave this stage, I would ask you to both shake hands, as is the custom on this set. A round of applause for them.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Well done, sir.
Yeah. Well, that's the debate today. Thank you very much for being a part of the show. I encourage you to follow TVC on Twitter, of course, at TVC News Nigeria. You can also follow me on Twitter at Femi Akonde TVC. And thank you very much for watching The Big Issue.